Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center Network with support from K-12 and Fuel Education and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. We're here in Clemson at the studio and are very happy to provide a program for you today that's really close to my heart in importance, and that is a program that focuses on resilience. And with me today to co-host, of course, is Dr. Sandy Addis, the director of the National Dropout Prevention Center and Network.
Yes, Marty. Good day.
Yes, it is. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Marty.
This is going to be fun.
It is.
Yes, it is. And you know, we are very happy each month to provide you with this learning opportunity. And today's program, as I said, will be focusing on resilience. And in order for you to kind of participate in the program as well, we have a discussion board on the website and also a Twitter account. So that information is on this website for you to participate in and follow up on yourself. But there's more, because this is professional development, isn't it, Sandy?
It is, Marty. You know, in the 15 effective strategies for dropout prevention that we have used for a long time as a core of our work, one of the effective strategies is professional development in dropout prevention, which generates acts of dropout prevention and better outcomes for students. And so the National Dropout Prevention Center is very pleased to offer a wide variety of things for the people that do dropout prevention, the tens of thousands of practitioners across the country. We have a number of things. We have the solutions broadcasts that are archived that people can go back and review and utilize as needed. We have a number of position papers, guides, different products and tools that people can use to do their work. We also have online courses in effective dropout prevention strategies. So professional development is a critical part of what we do, and we're glad to provide it.
I mean, it's over 31 years of experience in this work as well, I need to point out. Absolutely. And we see this program, Sandy, as a catalyst for further education. If you find this topic of interest, on the website are other resources that people can learn and construct a professional development, ongoing professional development program. And what we love about Solutions is we bring in experts.
Yes, we do.
And we've got one here who came all the way from Boston to see us.
We do, Marty, all the way from Boston down to Clemson. Yeah. We're very fortunate, Marty, to have with us Dr. Scott Solberg. Dr. Solberg is a professor of counseling and applied human development at Boston University. As we said, he comes to us from Boston. He is the author of scholar-centric social-emotional learning resiliency assessment instruments. He is a co-founder of the Massachusetts Institute for College and Career Readiness. He is a researcher with the National Collaborative for Workforce and Disability for Youth. He has focused his work on working with schools, states, school districts, particularly in the areas of individualized learning plans and implementation. And he consults with those type of entities on a regular basis. And he's affiliated with Graduation Alliance. So, Marty, we're very fortunate to have Scott here. And this topic of resilience is critical, because we know that to the extent that students are resilient and can become more resilient, they can overcome obstacles and risk factors.
Absolutely.
So, Scott, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you all.
Oh, wait, this is terrific, because I've got to tell you, audience, this is the ideal solutions. We're bringing such a national expert to you wherever you are, whether you're in a rural area, urban area, and you can't always have, Scott can't be everywhere, but he can be everywhere thanks to Solutions.
Yeah. Right.
So we're really happy that you're here, Scott.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Let's get started.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we talk a little bit first, just to also echo the work you all do is fabulous. I've been a big fan, been presenting at the conferences, and you're really bringing a community together around this issue. And I think as the dropout statistics are now showing some great gains, now we're starting to talk about high need youth as a population of risk, not just around graduating, right, but are they ready for their next transition in life?
Yes.
And that's really kind of the point of work that I'm looking at now as well. I worked a lot in Milwaukee working with dropout prevention, and then we got them to the end. They still didn't have those skills yet to really thrive in making that that transition either into a post-secondary or work, and we call it now college and career readiness. But it's just this idea, I think this is the main frontier, and I think bringing communities together like you're doing is exactly what's missing right now. We get them through with their graduate training, and then off they go to work, and where are they going to get a place to learn? And this is great. So.
I love that term you're saying, the new frontier in dropout prevention. It's not just, oh, if you just finish this, you get this, you'll have your diploma, and then anything, but you're not ready.
We need a future. We need a plan.
And we need to think about that before they reach that point.
That's right.
This is great.
Well, and the strategy, if you want to put up the first slide, we can begin talking through it. But one of the big strategy we've been focusing on is how do we help youth take ownership and start to drive this process. And so we have 6 different, or 5 in this case, resiliency areas that we call resiliency skills. They're similar to social emotional learning skills, right? We're all talking about the same kinds of things. What makes it resilient, and you've also talked about developmental assets, and we're all in the same subject matter. The reason we call it resiliency is coming out of Ann Maston's work that we have within our high need youth. These are the at-risk youth. They need to have emotional and psychological kind of like readiness to go to war, right? They've got challenges, they've got trauma, they've got all of these things that are going on. And what we're talking about these are some of the key things that help them get through despite those challenges. And that's where it flips from being a nice thing to have to a must-have. The other thing that's important in the work we've done is the malleability. We have a lot of people talking about some really cool constructs out there, a lot of neat, sexy ones coming along. But the minute they're called personality traits, the minute there's no theory underlying it, then we don't know there's nothing actionable here. There's nothing we can do with it. And so we were very careful in designing or identifying resiliency skills that had a strong research base around development, that we knew if we find this is important, we can now design into the school experience ways in which we can improve it. And so, one of the biggest ones is really goal setting. And we're finding out of some great work out of developmental psychology that if they're establishing career and life goals, if they see this post-secondary as a future, if they have this sense of future orientation, they're looking for ways to maximize their opportunities.
Right.
And they start taking charge. Now, getting it to the point where they're establishing those goals is critical, because we're not just telling them. Traditionally, I'm in career development, so the traditional strategy is give them an assessment tool and say, here you go. There's your answer. That doesn't teach them the skills to examine themselves and to build their own sense of career and life goals. Academic self-efficacy, we find, and our research over and over really looks at that as the most important mechanism. And I use the word mechanism because it's like if we can attack that and build it, great things happen. And out of our work, we're finding the academic performance, the social emotional development occurs, the kind of career readiness, future readiness occurs. And we all know that relationships are important.
Oh, very key.
But I don't want to talk about relationships anymore as just having them. I want to talk about, this is coming out of the Center for Promise, out of America's Promise Alliance research, that it's really for high need youth especially, they need a caring and encouraging adult. I've worked with caring adults who care so much for those kids they can't imagine them being successful because their lives are so traumatic. I don't need care as much as I need encouragement. I need that piece that says, yes, I connect with you, I believe in you, but I really can see in you some future opportunities here. And so it's that pushing, that sense of moving. So when we talk about connections, it's really that thinking about how we create a caring and encouraging environment, not just among teachers towards their students, but also among their peers.
Yeah, and their family and their community.
Huge,
I mean, it's everywhere.
Picking it up. And by community, you've talked, before we were talking about the importance of work-based learning and how we get employers involved in that caring and encouraging. Right?
Yes.
It's sort of like when my oldest child went to the doctor for the first time, 2 years old, and he comes back and I said, how's my big boy? He goes, oh no, big guy. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This doctor sees you for 5 minutes and now has changed the whole language? This is what employers can do, right? When they look at our high need youth and they say, you belong here in the workplace, I just need you to finish that degree, boom.
Wow.
It has more power than anything else we can do. So when we talk about these web of connections, right? This web of network and web is really important to think about. We don't talk about stress management much. Who knew our kids were under stress, and our teachers, and all of us, right? But that's like a major life skill, as well as the health and well-being, thinking about those elements. And I think that that's, if we had anything that our approach to resiliency comes in by bringing in that social emotional part around stress management and health management, all of which are malleable, it really begins to add more to the whole story and the picture of what's going on with the student. Let me pause there because I just said a whole lot. And
Scott, you mentioned the physician and
Yeah.
talking to the kid. You mentioned the community.
Yeah.
How do school people go about helping the community understand that this is part of their role too?
Yeah, you know, this is now a big issue. I think that when we talk about community, we need to be partnering with our community-based organizations, right? And these youth serving organizations have great talent and skills. When I was in Milwaukee, it was the Latino Community Center. The Latino Community Center had gang experts, they had support systems, and they could do the after-school programming, and it added value to what we could do in the school. That's not to say it was always an easy connection, right? But in time, it really grew to where they could depend on each other. They could realize that they had shared interests, they had common interests. And I think with the school, the challenge we have, especially when you think about high schools, which is where a lot of this stuff is happening, middle and high, it happens so fast. That day is a sprint. And I need people who can come in and work and make sure they have things in Spanish, because we have Spanish speakers, make sure they're culturally able to connect with my students. They've got to be able to work around this 9 to 8 to 3, 8 p.m. day. There's so much that's going on in there that I think that it's really a cultural divide issue than it is an issue that can't be done. I always call these imagination problems, not financial problems. But when I was working again in Milwaukee, I organized around 100 different community groups coming into our school. And I basically you had to meet certain requirements. You had to be all for all, had to meet with all students, not just those 20. This was at a time when all these literacy programs were coming in and saying, we'll work with 20. It's like, we got like 400 that need help.
Yes.
Your 20 is not going to get there. They had to have things in Spanish. They had to work with us as a school, and then it takes really good leadership to see the vision that we can do this, because it's a relationship building that has to occur. But private industry councils are already in there working hard, right? They're doing some great work as the workforce development projects that are going on. We've got a lot that are happening. We need more. We need more employer connection to all of this. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation has done a great job of laying out the framework for employers to get involved with our communities, with our schools. And now we need our local chambers to step up and find a way to work with the schools. And we've got some strategies. Maybe it's hiring an intermediary who can be the kind of the cross-cultural specialist between the school and the business, things like that. So
this whole idea of value added, looking and surveying your community, and really doing some kind of a community mapping asset of what every community is unique.
Right.
And so you can't today, and we can't today, say this is exactly what you need to do. But you sit down and start looking around you with the idea that if we want our young people to succeed, we need to add the value of everybody. And that's what I hear you saying here, is this whole connection thing is just so key to being able to achieve success.
And you have to do it each community has to look, like you said, at unique assets. I've seen rural communities come together around this. I've seen urban. It's just each one has different possibilities. We need to assess that.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like you're referencing what I call community messaging. The community sends a message to kids about who you are, what you can be, and what we want you to be.
That's right.
And sometimes that message is mixed, to say the least, to the kids.
It is, but I think there also has to be a shared framework. What are we coming together for?
Yes.
You know. Let's look at I think our next slide may have our theory of change here. Let's
Oh,
see what
okay.
we have.
Good.
Are we going to talk about health and well-being, though? Because I think that's...
You want to do some more time on
just a little bit of time on that. I
Oh,
think
I
that
see.
goes
And
back a slide. There, that number
There
5.
we go. 5 and 6 as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
this
a
is
big
huge.
issue, I would think.
It is, and our data is really showing that if kids are not feeling well, they don't continue in school. So we're looking at, in our initial research, it was 9th to 10th grade. They weren't making it. And to see that health and well-being is such a key piece to this. And we also know it's about their ability to focus, it's about their ability to manage. It's a very, and I would say that of all the assessment tools, when I could working in the classroom, when I do the assessments and the kids are looking at their individual results, it was that health and well-being that I could look over their shoulder and say, it looks like you want to talk with someone. And they go, yeah, I think so. It gave them a sense that, okay, this is a barometer that says life is not normal. But how do they know that if they don't get some information about it? That was kind of the actionable quality to that. Also, motivation to attend school, number 6 on there. This is really huge. Why are you going? And if all you're getting are negative outcomes, why are you staying? I mean, it's a self-defeating principle at that point, right?
Yeah.
But once you have a sense of career and life goals, once you've and I don't mean decision making. I'm not talking about have you decided on a career. I'm saying what's your future goals look like, right? Once you have that, all of a sudden school becomes relevant.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden I realize, oh, for me to get from here to there, I have to do well in math. I have to do well in English. So all of a sudden the literacy, the numeracy, and all this other social emotional learning, oh, I have to get along with people. I mean, all of these things that come up happen once youth start driving the sense that this has meaning and is relevant to me. And that's really how we've addressed the motivation piece.
Yeah. And I understand that one perfectly. I am not a mathematician. I married one, but I'm not one. And I can remember in high school, the whole idea of math was all of a sudden irrelevant to me. And to make myself like it, want to do it, was really hard. And I can understand that feeling if all your school is like that, hard and why. I mean, I could be doing X, Y, or Z. So I think all of us can understand that. I wouldn't just do it because I wanted to get an A, because actually that was pretty impossible.
Well, let me say that math. Let's just carve math out for a second.
Yes.
We're in a new world right now because when my daughter doesn't understand something in math, my first answer is, "Well, have you gone to Khan Academy?" And when I go to the math teacher and say, "My daughter's struggling on some homework, how do we?" She's 13. How do we help with the anxiety attack and the whole, the whole thing that's about that? And she goes, "Well, have her go to Khan Academy." So that we now have tools to support youth, because the problem we have in math is that you had to learn it when I'm ready to teach it.
Yeah.
And if you're not focused or you're not in class, you missed it.
That's right.
And you may not have the building blocks to get to the next step. And so what's happening now when you have an online basis for this is we got to rethink our whole orientation around math, because it's not about something that's inborn, it's about something you learn.
Yeah.
And now that we have new tools and new strategies, we got to help our high need youth realize, yes, you can. And we got to help our families get it. I know you did it, but they can.
Yeah.
And how do we help really build that up? So this is something that it is, the resources are there and they're free access. So we just have to connect our youth and our families.
And that's huge, because most parents, like me, could not help their kids with math past a certain time. And,
I can't. That's right.
And that's why you
That's right. So I said go to Khan Academy.
That's why you said Khan Academy. I'm with you.
Your mom's not here? Okay, let's talk about Khan Academy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not here. So right. So this is great, and this is part of the new era that we're in that really supports these kids who need to learn math. Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right. Well,
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking as we were kind of transitioning about if we're going to work at the community level, which I totally agree with. We really need a framework. We need a model. And so let's put up the next slide. This is a type of, I could show you all the data and the math, but we've decided not to do that. We're going to go with just some of the words. So we talked about the improving access to caring, encouraging adults. We really need that. And that's something we can do. And that when we talk about community, every human touch.
Yes.
Part of that network is people who are my support care, so my people who really believe in me and are there to listen, but I need instrumental support. And so when you talk about community, it's like, well, what are those instrumental supports in the community that we need to connect with our youth? What we found in our data was once they're immersed within these people who really care and believe in them, that's another source point. Not only the career and life goals is critical for this, but in our early research, it was just that caring adult and peer system that led to them seeing school as relevant and meaningful. It's enjoyable. I need to be here.
And one of the things about the sense of belonging be so important for resilience, and you see that like if you're in band or if you're in this club, you've got the adult and your peers, and that's actually in the school.
Exactly.
So that gives you a tie to the school.
I'm such a big fan of track and field.
Oh yeah.
Because it's based on the individual doing better than you did the last time, right? It's not just the winning, and there's a social environment.
Yes.
there's a lot of off time to just connect without the pressure and everything else going on, right? So yes, we need those elements, and we need to have those kind of structured opportunities to kind of create that relational base.
And it doesn't have to be school-based, of course.
No.
But therefore, that's a great one for school and community.
Oh yeah.
to do.
Well,
Absolutely.
let's. So now you teed up then. So 4-H, my 4-H background.
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah, big. That was a huge influence on my development. I would say that where I am right now is all based on what I did in 4-H. And so these outside school leadership and learning opportunities
Yes, I agree.
build tremendous character, build a tremendous sense of what you can do in life.
Yeah, they do. You know, players don't drop out during season.
Players don't drop out during season. And so in our high school, we had them do tutoring once a weekend so they could actually get their grades up so they could keep playing during that season. So that we can link academic within this, and the good schools do, so they know how to do that.
Sure.
So, so the other thing was, once students are focused on being in school, who knew they start to learn? You know, when they're
That's
focused
something.
on wanting to be there, the academic self-efficacy comes up, and so do the grades. But look what happens towards that grade retention, though. So this was, we're in a high-risk population school, and very high risk. And we were looking at the 9th graders coming in and whether they continued on into the 10th grade. So just that big, because we know that's a major, block period. And what we found was that managing health and that performance. So are you performing well enough to say I belong here? And are you feeling that you can manage the challenges that are going on? And these were kids living around gangs and low income settings and all the violence. So this was a big piece. So it really brought out your point. And so when you look at all the intervention components we need for this, right? We need kids to feel they belong. We need community organizations to help support some of that.
Yes.
We need to be working on building their competence. That's the self-efficacy. So who's in?
Yeah.
So these after-school community learning centers, the church community groups, all these groups that are coming in, it's social and it's academic.
Yes.
It's getting ready these skill sets. And it's also health access. How are we helping to manage the psychological, emotional well-being to make sure our kids can thrive, through this? So.
Do you see that increasing? I know, Sandy, we've done a lot of conferences on trauma. And is it a trend that's increasing, that more
I don't
people
think
are
so.
traumatized, or it's always been buried?
It's always been buried, and we had a huge dropout rate, right? And so, and we never looked at it. And now that we're realizing, as we're trying to really go after and connect with youth, and we're finally talking to them, who knew we could talk to them? We're realizing how much more is there.
Yes.
And I think it's a natural developmental process, and I think the framing it as trauma is great. The piece that if we probably do have more of now than we never before, anxiety. So because we have a world of work that's like, what is it? We have so much uncertainty that we have to learn how to manage anxiety, and we are not teaching that directly. So trauma, but now the new increase is going to be on the anxiety. And how do we help manage it in a way that people can feel they can hold on with some sense of future, knowing that the world is very uncertain. And the future, and by uncertain, that doesn't mean it's all negative. Uncertain just means it's not a clear path. And I've got to be able to take advantage of emerging opportunities. And so you got to be able to manage the anxiety so you can be focused on possibility. So it really is an interesting time that we need we do need to address. But I would say we've had lots of trauma going on for a long time. And we've got communities that are just in disarray that need more help. And in schools, we can't do it alone. So we've got to bring in our community organizations to support.
And it is always wonderful when you read a story about a community that has come together.
It's amazing. And it can happen. And a lot of it, some of it's financial, but a lot of it isn't. A lot of it's just rolling up the sleeves.
Willingness to do.
Exactly. So.
Okay. Oh, we lost our slide. Do we need it?
No, that's all right. We can go to the next one.
Oh, okay.
We kind of went through that.
Okay. And the next slide would show us what? Okay.
Yeah. So now let's just talk about, so what do we do about this? And we have developed some assessment tools. That was something you'd said at the beginning, to be able to identify those youth that have specific needs and concerns. What we found in looking longitudinally was these were the key factors, these 5 areas that really predicted whether someone was more at risk for dropping out. And by at risk for dropping out, we're using ball fonts and the whole zeitgeist now around the attendance, the behavior issues, the course performance, and those kinds of things. And so we were fortunate to work with a district that worked with us longitudinally to look from middle school all the way through high school.
Oh, good.
And when you looked at it and you said, what's going on, our assessment tools were pretty clear. The more severe you were on those at middle school, we had like an 85% probability of knowing whether or not you were going to be at risk for some failure.
So we've got to look. Well, we've always said it's a process,
Yeah.
but you can really pick up some things in middle school where there is still time.
Exactly. These would be considered leading indicators, right?
Yeah.
So what are the psychological, emotional leading indicators? Those students that have bad trauma, those students that are in family settings that may not be there, those that have had academic failure to begin with, but have experienced it in a failure way, right? So their confidence is down. Those individuals then are going to be down the road, and that's where the ABC model is really the lagging indicator that says, oh, it shows up.
Yeah.
So, so we were pretty surprised. I mean, as a researcher, you don't usually find this kind of data, but we were surprised, and we were also looking at, as you said, it starts early, but it's also multidimensional. It's not any one thing.
Right.
So when you look at these indicators, if they don't see a future, you know, in this case, we use it as importance of college. So do you feel like post-secondary of some kind, 2-year, 4-year training is in your future? If you don't, that becomes a risk factor because you're not really looking forward. Certainly, just the physical, emotional agitation. I'm holding on as best I can.
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
You know, is a problem. Do I feel like I'm competent enough to just operate in the classroom? You know, read the text material. You know, get along. Those are big pieces. The stress, just feeling it as a pressure, as a stressful thing, and then do I find school meaningful? That's the relevance piece. Do I really feel like being here is meaningful for my life experience? So when you look across those different resiliency areas, and these are subscales within that, to see them come out as really important predictors is important. And it's the kind of thing where the more we can learn early, the more we can kind of start programming for these youth. But this is a youth. When we talk about dropout risk, we're really talking about a very specialized group of individuals.
And wouldn't you say they're cumulative? I mean, if you have one problem, like my family, no one in my family goes to college, so that's not me, but everything else seems to be hunky-dory.
Yeah.
That may not be so detrimental, but if you have some of these others that were on that list.
That's right.
They-
It's the
we got-
combination
it's
that really
like
does it.
maybe one's okay, but more than one, or I don't know.
Well, what was interesting in our research was we could have students that are looking fine on all of our subscales except those 5. And so it really was targeting in those
key.
areas. Yeah,
Those
so you
are
look and
key.
say, well, they look all great, but why are you saying then that they're dropout risk? Because in these particular indicators, which were the ones most significant.
Oh, that's
predicting-
huge. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. You're really honing in. Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. But you know, my work has really been about actionable research. So the next slide really kind of gets at it as a way of saying, what do we do now with data in a way that are this is for the educators.
Oh, yes.
Right? So this is specifically for your school counselors, your really engaged educators, as a way of getting data back to them. They're very busy. We're trying to give them data on each individual that allows them to see where are they. So you see the purple on the left, those are the risks, those are the 5 indicators. When they get summarized, where does the person fall within that purple line? And as you see, only 2 students showed up on that. None of them in the dark purple. So that means that the relative risk is in the lower to middle. But these green, yellow, red are the very source areas of the resiliency that we want to look at. And one of the things that's been so interesting in our work is when we get some of these red lines and we get some of these purple lines, we'll have the school will call up, in this case it's the Graduation Alliance people, and say, your survey's wrong. Now it's a screening instrument, by the way. It's not a diagnostic.
Got it.
First of all.
Okay.
But second of all, they'll call up, it's wrong. You're telling us that our valedictorian is on your radar. This is ridiculous. It's our valedictorian. And every time my answer is always, we'll go talk to him. It's usually a her.
Yeah.
They get in talking, they go, oh, yeah, we found out. There's a lot going on here. I had a principal come up in the middle of a session, or at the end of one of my sessions, and say, I'm totally bought in. You told us that our top student was at risk, and we thought you were crazy. She had just tried to commit suicide the week before.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? So these are the things that are going on underneath. If you don't want to know about them, that's okay, but they're still going on, right? I mean, and this is like you were saying, is trauma all of a sudden, well, it's huge because we're finally focused on the fact that our youth are having challenging times. And we need to know about it. What makes this different is you can figure out what's going on. Is it a motivation issue? Is it confidence? Is it relational? Is it stress? We can figure out from there what we want to do as a tier 1, right? So the Success Highways curriculum, which you've all reviewed in years past, was really a classroom-based intervention to build a relational base with the students, get that authentic relationship with the teacher, create a group situation. That gets about 70% of the work done. But we also know we're going to need some tier 2 work too. We may need some grief, some trauma. This helps us identify who those students might be, as well as some tier 3. When we really get down to the dropout, we got to sit back and say, all right, let's really get to know what's happening here and figure out where we're going to plug you in for additional support. So it's an actionable item. It allows us to say, what are we going to do to meet the needs of all of our students?
Yeah.
The part we don't have today, but the students also get their bar graph. Because what I want is for the students to define for themselves what they see as a challenge. Right? Now, we're not saying, oh, you're a dropout risk. I mean, that's not what's happening. We're just saying, here's your areas of confidence. Here's a success profile, and here's your profile. What do you think?
Yeah.
No data, no numbers, no interpretations,
No.
just a conversation, dialogue. Here's how it works. Here's how we can build it. What do you think about yourself? Let's build a plan for success.
Well, obviously, a counselor tool.
Exactly.
So there's an assessment tool to get to these green, yellow, and red things?
Yes, right. So that's the assessment part that we developed over
see.
years.
Yeah.
Was lots of validation.
And all the research based behind that, so that's reliable.
All the
these.
Yes.
So
The
topics.
model, the actual surveys have great reliability and validity, but the best part in terms of beyond that is that it's all based on theory. So that if you say self-efficacy is the issue, we know how to design strategies to improve self-efficacy. And I've given you the theory of change about how we're going to build meaningfulness. And everyone says motivation. I can't get kids motivated. Well, we can when you create a relational environment, when you help kids get career and life goals. So all of these elements that we work with have some theory of change underneath them that we can use to design curriculum.
Scott, I'm a principal
Yeah.
looking at this. I'm bought in. How do I get from nowhere relative to this to I've now got this information in hand for myself and my staff?
Yeah. Oh, how do you get it to that? Well, that's the Grad Alliance piece.
Okay,
I do the I'm the researcher, and then they're the group that really does the assessment tools. And they're not as a commercial plug, but just as an amazing group. They're here for high need youth. So their whole focus is you're giving up on these kids. Then let us work with you.
I see.
We also know that we need to work now with all kids because we've got half our population are in that high need category right now. Half our public school population in the high need population. And we're talking about disability, ELL, underperforming, youth of color. We're talking about this whole group. And so there's a big population that need this kind of work. And it's great to have people like yourselves, as well as other organizations like Grad Alliance, America's Promise Alliance, all of these groups out there that are solely focused on how are we going to raise all this bar up for everyone in our country, and that's what they're doing. So that's the place. They've got all the stuff set up, and they'll have resources in your list of resources that will also connect them up. I think the challenge we have, and I just got done with some meetings in my own state of Massachusetts. We're working on social emotional learning, and I gave them the same feedback. If we don't get data down to the point where it's actionable, it really we lose.
That's right.
Whether we're looking at social emotional learning, which this is certainly in that part. There's resiliency. We've got to have it in a way people can get it and consume it, and it has to be based on reliable, valid measures and malleable constructs. That's the key. If you tell me something's really important, like at socioeconomic status, that's great. Nothing I can do with that, right? So I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying I can't do anything about it.
Right.
And so we really got to be recognizing and really thinking through hard when people give us a really cool, new concept. Ooh, this is it. What can we do with it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's...
I'll have to quote Kirsten Basler, who's the state superintendent in North Dakota. She said at a meeting I was at recently, we've got to do more than just admire the problem.
That's right. Look at that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
We have to look at a way in which and you said this at the beginning, it's a community problem. So how do we as a community, how are we going to be able to respond? And that's what I mean by we're all responsible for it. How are we going to respond in a way that's going to help lift all of our youth? And it takes everything.
Yeah.
We have to get involved.
Yeah. So we can use tools like this to help us identify the problem, but getting back to resiliency, we can offer solutions, here we are, to address specifically. And I love the fact that you're involving students in the assessment as well, too. And then the dialogue can start. Would this all be counselor-based as far as the
No,
student?
it needs to be whole school-based. And so if you want to put the next slide up, that's just the result of one, but I'll give you context about it. So I think it has to happen in the classroom.
Yeah.
School counselors are there, and they're critical. That's who I train. It'd be
Okay. Okay.
So love school counseling, and they're kind of the director, if you will. And they need to jump in when youth need that additional support. But we actually need all of our educators to become those caring and encouraging adults, right? Because they're on the front line.
Yes.
And what our educators learn, and this is with the Success Highways curriculum part that I used, but this would be the same, I think, in many of the SEL related programs, is that once that relational base is forged, our teachers have more leverage to help kids really learn.
Yes.
And so, yes, we want it doesn't, school counselor having leverage isn't as important, right? I need that math teacher to build that relational base so the kids are wanting to learn math.
Yeah.
And that's what we found. And so it's what's different in the Success Highways is we're creating authentic conversations. So teachers are actually having to listen and learn, and the students guide the dialogue. And so it's amazing to watch, it's amazing to experience, but these kids will talk about the trauma, the issues, and the things going on. They will make sure. We've had kids where the girls were talking about violence in a way that was delivering one of the girls in the classroom to the school who was in an abusive relationship. And they just kept asking the questions and kind of going through the whole thing, and because it was around health and well-being, conversation.
Yes.
And one of my staff who was at the school at the time was in it and came to me and said, okay, so this just happened, what do we do? And I said, now's our turn for the school counselor. This is why they're here.
Yeah.
And they're ready to take over. So they used it to deliver one of their peers and to help. This is the stuff that happens. It's real. And when teachers are recognizing this, what they hear from the students is, oh, I thought they were lazy. No, they're sleeping because they're working all night.
Yes.
Which, yes, we know is against the law, but kids are working all night.
Yeah.
They're realizing these kids really do care, but they have to drop their brothers and sisters off at the bus, which means they're going to be late for their bus.
Yeah.
And so they're getting a closer understanding and connection of what's happening, and it changes their belief systems. Their whole stereotype structure breaks down.
Yes.
And kids get that because they know who's being real and who's authentic, and this is helping create that relational base. But the other thing is the peers are now seeing each other in a different way. And so they start supporting each other. I can't count on a teacher to always see everything happening. The peers stand up for themselves. And so it has to be done in a classroom setting because that's the power base. This is data on that when you look from, this was a Denver Public Schools when they did this as a transition into high school. And they did the Success Highways. And what they found was those who got it during a summer kind of bridge program, they ended up doing much better throughout their academic year on all kinds of indicators. So it's sort of like, think about it as the roadmap, right? It's a cognitive emotional roadmap of how to be successful. And youth want to be successful. But many of them have experienced failure, but they don't know what are we supposed to do to become successful. And once we give them that roadmap, they go, oh, okay. And when we have educators that are truly, and I mean, we got great educators, but they're getting beat up. And when we find a way to facilitate kind of a shared working environment, great things are going to happen. So for me, it's all about the students having actionable data on themselves that they can use to define and have a sense of power in it. And it's about an authentic relational base that happens in the classroom. And then we've got our school counselors and social workers ready when things pop up and we need some additional support, they're there to do it. But you'd be amazed at how this manages a lot of the issues. So there's less going to the school counselors, less going to the social workers because it's all getting addressed.
It's all getting addressed.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite experience, alternative education, was years ago we did a video project and a program also on Middle College High School. And there are several in Greensboro, an area, Guilford County, North Carolina. There's, there were at least 7 Middle College High Schools, but they were all small, 100 students. And this is an age, high school, where there's cliques, there's this, none of that. It was everybody. The film we did had, you're filming people and their faces, students, counselors, principal, teachers, just aglow. And everybody supported everybody else.
It's amazing.
I see that in what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me give you a couple stories.
Yeah, good. I love stories.
So one of them, we did this in one of these. This was when the Gates Foundation came in to redesign schools in Milwaukee. And so one of the schools I was working with, they did this. And again, the dialogue really allows the students to take over the conversation because it's their life experience. It's coming in and connecting with the teacher. And in the first year, it all went great. The second year, I was there with the group when they were doing it, and the girls were leading the discussion, and I had a teacher with me that was saying, you can't make me do this, because it's a little, if you're not used to self-disclosure,
Right.
if you're only used to teaching your subject matter, it can look a little frightening. feel a little bit frightening. Well, these girls took over the process, and they finally at the middle of it said, you know, we've got some new students here, and we want to talk to you about whether you like being here, because this is where we belong. And this is a school, by the way, where 60 Minutes did a show on many years before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was in the north end of Milwaukee, very difficult area. And these girls are saying, school is where we find ourselves, where we thrive, where we're thriving, where we belong, and we're enjoying it. And we want to make sure you're enjoying it as much as we are.
Oh, nice.
And they went around to every single student to find out their experience. And then when they were done, they go, oh, and we have some new teachers here. We want to make sure you're enjoying it as much as we are.
My goodness.
And this teacher turned to me and says, this is great. Oh my gosh, this is just great. Yeah, you see that dynamic.
Yeah.
We had stories where girls banging on the back door because they got to school late after they were allowed to get in, and the mom's there in the rain, and mom said, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
she says she has to be here. One of the stories we had, now this is in the small schools, right? But I believe we can create that same environment in our big schools.
That's the thing.
Because if it's done in the classroom level and we're all creating this relational base, you're magnifying that. And when we did that, in the ninth, we had one situation. My wife was actually there. She's a professor at Boston University as well. But for a while, she was working with me at South Division, and her class of girls, math comes up, right? And so these are ninth grade girls who are entering high school with fourth grade math levels.
Ooh.
Okay, so this is the school we're in. We got a long ways to go.
All right.
And we weren't focused on 10th grade scores. We were focused on doing well through school, right? Improving. Well, they learned through this process that if they want to go to college, they've got to pass math. And the math teacher was not teaching math when she was there, which was not every day.
Yeah.
So they petitioned. They did a formal petition to the principal. We would like a new math teacher.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And the teachers and the principal said, yeah, I'm going to get you a new math teacher. And did. Went through the union, said, yep, looked at the record. That's power. When we have students focused on learning how to learn, it's amazing how much more work we can do.
Yeah.
And that's the big shift. And I think that's the challenge I have with a lot of what we're doing for kids. We're not doing things with our students.
Yes.
And there's a great deal of power when they get involved and they work on
Yes,
it.
there is.
We were talking before filming about civic engagement and how come that's so powerful. Same thing. What happens when you start defining the problems in their community and we start empowering them to go out and solve them?
Oh, yes.
Great things happen.
Yeah.
Same thing when it's around their classroom. Same thing when it's around their own learning.
So there is a way to take that beautiful model I saw to scale. It's classroom by classroom and school by school.
Exactly.
And it can be, because now this is great for 100 students. How can it go to scale?
It is. It starts, yeah.
Scott, I'm a counselor, I'm a principal. I've watched the Solutions broadcast. You got my attention. I'm self-inventorying. I don't have this in my school. Where do I start?
Well, where do you start with it? The good thing is you got the resources after this, you know, at the end of this session, which you need to look at. You know, I think what it happens is you've got to find, you've got to get a group of teachers together. I love the professional learning community model.
Yes.
We start with a choir always. You know, you talked about the 100, that's the choir, right? We've got a group, we've hired them in for certain reasons. Or in this case, we're in large schools, we need to bring you in. What are the 5 we're going to work with? I like to have a school counselor, special ed administrator, if there's a career tech ed, and then I want those 3 or 4 important teachers, right? The ones that we know if they buy in, everybody buys in.
Yeah.
And one administrator so that we got resources or at least a connection back. That's the group that then gets this conversation. They're the ones that dig into the materials.
Yeah.
They're the ones that go in and realize, okay, here's 3 or 4 different things we can look at. And they can look at the graduation lines work. They can look at our success highways. They can look at other programs. There's lots of stuff. Castle's got a whole bunch of stuff out there. It's all good. And they can look and say what might work for us. But whatever they're going to start designing is going to be something that they want to pilot in a small group. Could be the 9th grade, or could be if it's middle school 1 grade. We don't want to go whole school. We have to build our capacity.
Yeah.
One of the challenges I think principals get this right from the beginning is we don't have professional development on how to design and innovate. We don't.
Yeah.
And so we have to recognize that we've got great content knowledge in our subject matter, but not about system change. And so we've got to work together on this. So interestingly, the Massachusetts Institute for College Career Readiness that I run, MICR, designed just for that. Where we got an IES grant to work with 14 districts to help them build their capacity, so that we just work with them, give them the resources, similar to what you're doing. You're working with your access to resources is so important, but we also give them a project management system, and there's places that they can go, and we have them in our and hopefully some of the resources we have. will showcase that. But they need a project management system. They need a community that's going to invest in really doing the research and looking at the different vendors that are out there. If they need to go for funding, you've got your chamber, you've got your United Way, you've got places that are looking for innovations around this area, so you might need to partner up with them. But in that sort of community kind of building that's going on, great things are going to happen. And you need a principal who's going to say, I don't care if you fail, because if you fail, then we're that much closer to getting it right. And so it's that willingness to take a risk, build the community, pilot it, and then let it start to build.
Now, I was kind of interested in the next slide coming up about these competencies.
Yeah.
Maybe we could put that slide up for a minute.
Yep, sure.
And continue the conversation.
So this is Castle's, these were the traditional 5 resiliency or social emotional learning skill areas. It's a beautiful framework. It what it does is it lays out the different areas we should be thinking about when we think about social emotional learning. As a framework, there's different ways in which it can be actionable. So the resiliency skills that I showed you actually map onto these as more operational definitions. So you see things like goal setting we've talked about. You've heard about motivation. We've talked about support systems, networking. All of these different, the ability to make decisions and such and things like that. All of these are very important areas. The nice part about having a national framework, and our colleagues at Castle have done a great job of kind of mobilizing a national movement around it. What's nice about this common framework is research has done a great job of being able to catalog different programs and activities, seeing how they're addressing these, and then being able to show that these are going to be really strongly predictive of future academic performance. Very important. It's interesting when you talk to employers, because what's the first thing they want? They want students that are graduating with these skills too. So these actually, we can flip these into employability skills if we want.
Absolutely.
And so as I said earlier, when we're talking about high need youth, I call it resiliency, because they're really, they're the ingredients and critical elements that are going to help them be successful despite the challenges they're facing. But we all need these, because these are the things that are going to make us effective throughout life. So it's a beautiful framework. It's really exciting.
It is indeed. I wanted to point out there is a little link down below to the policy brief that this is all based on, and I think on the website we'll pull that out and make sure that that's a link that people can get to help them as they start doing this professional development.
This was a policy brief by my colleagues at the Rennie Center. They're the co-leaders with the microgroup, and they did a wonderful job looking at SEL around the nation. It's just such a growing area. There's so much going on that it's hard to keep up, with all the great stuff. But it's a good model. It's got good legs, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I have this feeling there's going to be a ton of resources for these professional learning communities to kind of delve into and get excited about. And this looks like one of those.
If you go to the next slide, I think what it'll do also is it'll kind of take a look at it now from a college and career readiness standpoint. One of the things that I think is really critical is we can't just graduate students. They've got to have a plan, and they've got to have the skills to action that plan, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we talk about with college readiness is just whether or not they've got the academic skill sets. Career readiness, though, really becomes interesting, because now it's about one's ability to think about their self-efficacy in relation to, can I do the career search process? Can I think about my skills, my interests, my values? Can I see where we might apply those? Those become really important. It's as two related, but in some ways separate. And so the ILP work, or the individualized learning plans, which go by many names throughout the country. I think in Georgia it was called the Peach State Plan for a while, I think. And South Carolina, you call it the Individualized Graduation Plan, which graduation plan makes it sound like it ends at high school, but now we know this is elementary through life. It actually takes it all the way through life. And so we've got a lot of people are now calling it like individualized career an academic plan or career action plans. So there's a lot of language around it. But the idea being that it kind of ties all this together, where social emotional learning and resiliency is really the skill set that we need to be successful in life. And it's really about my management of self. And so within the individualized learning plan model, we talk about self-exploration skills, career exploration skills, career planning, and management skills. And that management becomes a really cornerstone to this whole thing. And so this becomes frameworks that groups can use as you get that professional learning community to say, all right, we've got this high risk, we've got a high risk population of students we're working with. We're going to help build their capacity to be successful. It's going to start with being successful right here in this environment. Right, and that's where like the Success Highways and some of the other, Castle has a number of SEL different programs. That becomes important. But we also have to focus on making sure we really help them establish those career and life goals through this process. You heard about the girls saying, I need algebra. Well, that was through Success Highways saying you're not going to have a future if you don't get through math, right? And so helping really them learn more about the post-secondary pathways and how they align with the academic pathways is really picked up through the individualized learning plan process, and resiliency is a cornerstone within that. So as a professional learning community, if they're operating on this whole piece, they can really figure out at each grade level what they want to be doing to help really create action plans to help their students thrive. And that to me, I like the word thrive now over climate. I think thriving is am I growing and am I getting towards my own, meeting my needs and achieving my goals. That becomes the emphasis.
So career readiness is not just I'm going to be an anesthesiologist and I know how to become one.
That's not a bad shot though, by the way. Yes, but no, that's not what it is.
In this sense, career readiness is more, I have a sense of direction, I have skills to get me there, I understand that there are steps and there are pieces along the way, not just a goal and a credential, but a skill set.
That's right. In our research with the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, we found, we basically, our final conclusion was career readiness drives college readiness. That once youth realize they have a future, and there's a future possibility, they start focusing on the academics. And we saw that once that career and life goal was established, they started selecting into a more rigorous set of courses. Kids with our youth with disabilities that were on a different graduation track went back to the regular graduation track because they realized that was the pathway they needed to go on. So it's giving power to youth and the families to really see the value of what the academic opportunities are bringing because it's now aligned to something that's meaningful for that individual. And that's what career readiness is all about.
And I do some things on campus here at Clemson with students who don't know what they're going to be when they grow up, and here they are.
Tell me about it.
And so, you may be college ready.
You're not.
4.0, all this to get here. What shall I major in?
That's the point.
That's they don't know.
And this is the issue. So when we started elementary, we want our elementary students entering middle school with a purpose. We want our middle school doing this so they can enter high school with a purpose. And we need our high school students here because they got to enter the whole college with a purpose. We found, is this on the next slide? It might be the...
Oh, I have this...
One more. Oh, yeah, one more slide. Let me show you this.
Okay.
So here's what happened. Here's your Clemson students. So...
Next slide.
When we did some research with our high school students, we found that only 40% we would call career ready. Okay. And what that meant was they had a sense of a plan. And they had a sense of the importance of what they were doing right now to actualize that. And those students came up with more academic self-efficacy. They had the career readiness. They had all these great resiliency skills going in. But the reality was 60% did not. And you know what was most interesting? Was that the 40% were by and large in career tech ed, and the others were going to college.
Right. That was the goal.
As though something about college was going to wake me up. Well, I don't know if you've looked at our student debt rates right now. Over $1 trillion, and continuing to grow. It's not working out in college.
No.
If you're not you may have the cognitive skills, but if you don't have the emotional skills, which is what we're calling resilience, social emotional learning, if you don't have those skills, you don't have a sense of meaning. And so for me, career readiness is critical. Now, we need to do this. We know this in higher ed. We've got to start doing this right away, even before they walk in the door. They've got to start entering with how you're going to use this as an opportunity for your development. But to say that we're building, I'm all about philosophy majors. I'm all about liberal arts. I have a lot of colleagues who aren't. I'm all about that. I've had people from labor, the labor management group saying, boy, you take that philosopher and add a graphic design course and they're going to be worth X number of dollars because they know how to think, they know how to write, they know how to speak, they know how to do research. There are great skill sets we're learning, but you know what? They don't matter if the individual doesn't realize what those skills are and how they transfer to the world of work. And so this idea of at the higher ed, we've got to be focusing on transferability of skills, but we can start doing that with this ILP work right away. We can start having them realize realize, or even in high school, what are the transferable skills you have? Who knew Minecraft had so many work-based learning applications?
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I have a grandson who is
Oh my goodness!
loves it. Yes.
Oh my goodness! I
Yes.
went in and I just, because I have a little 10-year-old at home who's all into Minecraft, and I have a colleague who says I look for people that are playing Minecraft, and then I turn them into $100,000 a year because they have a way of interacting and thinking that I need in the tech world that I'm working in. So we need to see that what youth have are transferable skills. We need them to become aware of that and see where that fits in the world of work. And we need to do the same at the higher ed level. We need to be looking at our majors as transferable skills and competencies. And once we start doing that, then we can start mapping into some future pathways.
Yeah. So we need to include all post-secondary. I mean, we always logically think of the technical colleges. So this is a goal, and the way you can become a welder
They need it.
is to do that, and then you're all set. But you know, it's not just the community colleges or the tech colleges. We have to think beyond. Although some colleges do not tout themselves as career readiness.
I know.
You know,
But we need to be.
But there are skills that you could learn that are on your list that have nothing to do whether you're majored in philosophy or engineering.
Exactly.
You know?
Well, the big challenge too is first we have to have them finish whatever they started.
Yeah.
If they don't finish that 2-year, 4-year training program, they're just going to have debt. So there has to be the skill sets to get there, and there has to be some direction that's going in. But especially, I love the 2-year college, and I feel like we at the at the 4-year universities need to be following their lead and supporting what they're needing to have done, because that's where our communities have the most biggest opportunity for change. We can take people from the workforce back in and through. Where those programs, it may be a welding program now, but as long as I'm helping the individual realize, here's the role of the 2-year college, here's the other opportunities. From welding, you can become an entrepreneur, you can start moving into, there may be some technology applications. I know the high-tech manufacturing area, we keep hearing about all of these jobs that aren't being filled. It's in the high-tech manufacturing. It's huge, and there's great money there.
Yeah.
2-year college has to be able to have to figure that out. But we need our youth going in realizing their pathway is constantly developing, and what are the different education pathways that we need. And that can happen in the high school.
There's something about maturity, though. You know that me at 18 was different than somebody else at 18.
Oh my gosh.
I was probably like 12 at 18.
I know.
So I can't make these kind of decisions. But the technical college and you see this a lot, right here, a bridge program. All through our state of South Carolina, there's bridge programs, 2 years, and then if you keep going, you can transfer to
we need that.
different
That's
state
what
institutions
I did.
here.
That's exactly what I did. Started at 2-year, and then went to the 4-year, and then went up. I agree. I think especially our youth of color, when they enter in, if they're going to the 2-year first, they need to be connected to a 4-year automatically, because otherwise they're going to sit in the 2-year and they're not going to leave.
Yeah.
And so when we have this, you're entering a family, and this is the pathway, and we need connections with the 4-year through that process. That we're all working together in terms of your needs. Absolutely. But let me come back to your question. I got another story for you.
Oh, goody.
So you're right. Youth develop in different ways and at different times, right? And for me, I had 4-H, and thankfully I did, because it gave me a foundation, because I wasn't doing it in school at all. It was not even. Let's not talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I played soccer a lot. That was good, and there was a psychic involved, but we don't have time for that story. But you'll have to bring me back for that one. So there was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. They did this whole process where they're learning about their skills, their interests, their values, where they can plug in. And this young woman, Mia, I call her Mia, she just was kind of lost through the whole thing, was at kind of the bottom of her class, bottom third, I guess, until she took a biotech course at the end of her 10th grade. So she's in the spring of her 10th grade, takes this class, realizes, wow, hospitals look like fun. Right? Well, now she has the skill sets to look and think about herself, what she can do. There's online career information systems that facilitate. She realized the 2-year college had a dietitian certification she could do that summer. So she did. Gets her dietitian aid, starts working on that, comes back in fall, starts taking all the advanced math and science classes she could take. And by the time she graduates, she has a full scholarship to become a nurse.
Okay.
So for me, it's about, we build their skills and their capacities, but we totally get that their action, they're kind of taking it over, can happen at random. It could be that they went and met with an employer who said, wow, you really belong here. You got to get more on this. Oh, really? Oh, I got to do that. And now they got going, right? So we can't know when they're going to get, especially we know adolescents.
Yes, exactly.
I've got a 13-year-old. I know things happen in weird ways. But what we can control is building their capacity. to be able to know how to work with this when that happens. Again, it's not about deciding, it's not about decision making. She went in and said, I love the hospital. Great.
Yeah.
Look at the things I can do within the
Yes.
hospital.
Yeah.
And now she's navigating and acting in a way that's much stronger. She never graduated at the top of her class. She just graduated with an attitude and an opinion and a way of communicating that was well beyond any of her other graduates. And so colleges see that, right? So they get that. They know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But it happens at any time. You know,
Yeah.
it didn't happen to me until I finally got out of the 2-year. Had to learn how to learn first.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Everybody's on a different pathway, but there's some certain things that can be provided by the school, the community, the families,
Right.
to facilitate and provide that magic moment when they finally figure out what's important to them and what they want to do.
You know, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, as a parent, I want my child to have those characteristics, to have those experiences, but heretofore we probably just sat around and wished for them and hoped they happen. But now we're here. There's actually a concept map and a road map to get us there.
There is.
To take
There
those
is.
kids in that direction.
There is. And you know what's interesting about as we talk about social emotional learning, I love talking to parents about this stuff because these are the same success strategies they need at work. These are life strategies, right? If I'm talking to a medical doctor, I got to have some confidence. I got to be able to communicate it. I got to be, have done my research. There's so many little things that goes into it. But even on the job, so much of this is just relevant. Helping our youth kind of get that and see parents saying we're trying to help them get that helps connect. With the individualized learning plan, a lot of our schools are now realizing this is a great way to get parents involved, right? Because our parents need this.
Yeah.
Who are you? What can
Yeah.
you do? Where can you apply it? Can you get back into school? How do you get your stuff going? And so we can actually create a parallel process so that the students and their families are moving through.
Yeah.
And one of the exciting things is a lot of our online systems are allowing parents to have their own account. And so they really can be part of this process. So I do agree when I do use the word student a lot, but a lot of times it's student and their families that we need to think. I'm not trying to pull the student out. I'm trying to build capacity for this whole unit to really, do this work. So it is very important.
Hey, we got a great starter for schools all over this country to start looking into this area, Scott. Thank you so much.
There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of good examples out there in our states. There's a lot of great stuff. Even South Carolina's been a big leader on the individualized learning plans. I got to study at school, some great stuff going on, but it's now being echoed everywhere.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Well, this is exciting. I'm betting that we got viewers that are saying, I can do that. I can move in that direction with my school, with my staff, with my community, with my parents. So I see that as a great opportunity. And the good thing is, Marty, we've got the resources on the website as part of this broadcast.
Yeah, and I also appreciate your bringing out how do we get started. And if you missed that for some reason, go back and watch this again because Sandy asked the question and Scott answered it about how you all can get started when you just are starting with, wow, we want to get into this and help all our students. The story about the valedictorian who tried to commit suicide, it's all our students. It's not just by the grades.
That's right.
Yeah, so gosh, thank you for flying down here
Thank you. This is
and
wonderful.
joining us for one of the best programs I've ever been
What
on.
more could you want for your child if it's your own child or a classroom of kids or a school full of kids? What more could you want than to have these resilient characteristics and
Yes,
skills?
exactly. So
Great.
thank you.
Great,
Thank you
Scott.
very much.
Thank you so much for
All
your
right.
time today.
Well, thank you.
At the National Dropout Prevention Center, we appreciate people like you that share and take what you've done, your research, your work, and put it out there in a practical way that we can understand it and apply it in our schools and in our communities and families.
Thank you, and I appreciate all your work as well.
thank
This
you.
is great. This is what we need in our communities.
Well, I'm sure
Connecting.
you'll be hearing from some people. What we typically find is when people watch these broadcasts and then they look at the resources, say, how do I get in touch with that? How do I access that? How do I? And we may get calls. You may get calls, but that's
Love
what we
it.
want our
Yeah.
viewers to do, Marty.
That's right. We invite you all to join us with this conversation. And if you have questions, I think Scott will be available. His email address will be there, and
Get you in touch.
he'll get you in touch. But this is just the beginning. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
you,
very
man.
much.
All right, everybody, it's time for us to say goodbye for this episode of Solutions. I think you'll agree with me that there's an awful lot here to chew on and an awful lot once you look at those resources so you too can get started in helping all our kids graduate. So thanks very much for joining us today.